All right. All right, let's get this thing started. For those of you who don't know me, my name is Tom Blanchard. I'm the president of LVR, the Las Vegas Realtors, and I want to welcome you to the third of a series of webinars put on by Nevada Realtors that focus on evictions, rentals, and now rental relief programs. That's right, you heard it here first, rental relief programs. Today's program is offered in conjunction with CALV, the Commercial Alliance of Las Vegas, and we asked CALV to invite members from all sister organizations, whether you are a realtor member or not. This information is so important for our industry. We wanted to share it as widely as we could. I want to thank all the attendees for joining us. We had over 100 commercial professionals join us today. I want to let you know that tomorrow is a second webinar on commercial relief programs by Clark County. Unfortunately, we could not get both programs all at once, but we hope you'll join us tomorrow to hear about Clark County's programs as well. We will put the link in the chat box so you can register for that. And we will be recording today's webinar, and that will be posted on NVR's YouTube channel and will be provided to CALV and LVR for posting there as well. So please give a warm welcome to our CALV president, Robin Civish. Robin, it's all yours, my dear.
Thanks, Tom. So I want to thank you all for joining us today to listen to Nevada Treasurer Zack Conine as he explains the Commercial Rental Assistance Program. I'll also have three panelists on with me later to help facilitate some Q&A with him. Bobbi Miracle, Natalie Allred, and Chris McGarey. We want to welcome State Treasurer Zack Conine. The Treasurer has worked with Nevada Realtors throughout this pandemic and sought our input as the relief program took shape. We met with the Treasurer to discuss the program prior to the release and to provide him with the important information about how the commercial market works. Treasurer Conine is going to take the first 10 minutes here to explain the program, and then we'll take about 20 minutes afterwards for some Q&A. So let's get right to it and welcome Nevada Treasurer Zack Conine.
Hi, well, thank you, Robin, and thank you, Thomas. I appreciate the introductions and the invitations. Thank you all for making the time today. And in general, I want to thank realtors and members of the commercial and residential rental landlord side all the way through for both the feedback and the input as we start building these projects out. So I'm going to talk about rental assistance in a big broad scope. I'll go through the residential side just so everybody's got it from a situational awareness perspective, as well as the commercial side. Happy to take questions on that or anything else at the end. So the state of Nevada is using $50 million of coronavirus relief fund dollars. So those are dollars that came to the state and the county of Clark and the city of Las Vegas through the federal government as part of the CARES Act. In total, Nevada will receive about $1.25 billion. The state's portion of that is $836 million, and we're spending $50 million of that to start on residential and commercial rental assistance. Residential rental assistance went live yesterday. It's a $30 million program. Roughly, we think that'll be about $20 million in Southern Nevada, which will be in addition to Clark County's about $30 million of their money in Southern Nevada, and $5 million in our rural communities, $5 million in the county of Washoe. In a general sense, the way the residential program works is it helps people get caught up on rent that may have been avoided during the eviction and foreclosure moratorium. So basically the months of April, May, and June. It's about back rent. People have to show that they were impacted negatively by the coronavirus, whether that was a decrease in earnings, a loss of job, a decrease in hours, whatever the circumstances might be. They have to show that they're under 120% of area median income, which is about $60,000 for a family of one, about $80,000 for a family of three in Clark County. Different amounts over the state, but that's a good way to think through it. Thomas, you might want to mute yourself there. Additionally, you have to show that you've got less than $3,000 in liquid household assets. We don't think this is a real problem, but we certainly heard stories about individuals taking, say, government benefits and not paying their rent. So we wanted to make sure that this really went to people who needed it. That program rolled out, like I said, yesterday. In Clark County, it's being administered through 14 community organizations directly through Clark County. So the state is backfilling the Clark program. Additionally, in the other, in Reno and in the rural communities, it's been sorted through their regional housing authorities. So after day one, we feel generally pretty good. Obviously, we're getting a ton of feedback, and with that feedback, we'll make adjustments. I think that is sort of what you should expect from any program that comes out of our office. As we get more information, we're going to make different choices and try to do a thing better. Moving on to the commercial side, again, happy to take any questions on the residential, but I know we're here for the commercial. The Treasurer's Office, in combination with the Governor's Office of Economic Development and Business and Industry, is working on spinning up a commercial rental assistance program that's going to go live, we think, in about 3 weeks. Could be 4, could be 5, but we are having to spin that one up from the ground up. So we want to make sure that it works and it's robust enough to take what we expect will be a slew of applications coming in. That commercial program is primarily based on 2 factors. One, the size of the award could be up to $10,000, is based on whether or not, how much revenue the business lost over the second quarter period, calendar period, year over year. So April, May, June 20 versus April, May, June 19. That'll help set eligibility. The goal here again is to deal with that period of time during when the eviction and foreclosure moratorium was in place due to Directive Number 8. Minimum size of award is going to be $5,000, or I suppose less if your rent was less. It's capped out by the total amount of rent. We're currently thinking about rent as rent plus CAMs. It can't include property taxes due to the restrictions around the source of funding from a federal level, but hoping to get any feedback on that front. We think $10,000 is about the right number. We're targeting small businesses, not large businesses. We also know that a majority of large businesses who had access to were able to take PPP funds or other sources of federal funds. If you took PPP funds, this program won't be eligible. You won't be eligible for this program in the first round. You may be eligible in future rounds depending on how much demand we have at the beginning. But the goal is really that small business. Additionally, we'll be giving priority to businesses that fall under the DBE category from a state of Nevada perspective, which means businesses that are women-owned, minority-owned, or veteran-owned. And the way that the program will work is we'll open up so people can see what information we're requesting. We'll then open up for a week or 2 for a short form application. In that application, you'll identify, are you a DBE? What kind of revenue decrease did you have? What's your state business license, et cetera, et cetera. But one sheet of information, no financial backup. We'll then take those sheets and triage the applications so that DBE businesses with higher revenue loss will go first, then higher revenue loss, like greater than 50%. Then we'll keep kind of going down to make sure that the money gets to the hardest hit individuals in our community first. Because of that process, people aren't going to have to submit all their information at the first time. We'll reach back out to you and say, okay, so you're in this tranche. You have got a week to get us your information if you want to get access to these funds. We're taking that model from some other places that have used it. It seems to be slightly more effective when you have time to set it up than just encouraging everybody to send in all their information right now. That's, of course, what led to many of the problems and all the consternation around the PPP program, right? Was that people would apply on the first day but not know where they were in the queue because the decisions were being made from a bank perspective on sort of who to help and whom not to help, which is, you know, fine and allowable under the rules, but didn't really achieve the policy goals of the program. So that commercial program is still very much in discussion. We're working with our partners. We're looking to get feedback on amounts and type and the rest. I'd say it's relatively set, but of course the legislature will have a bite at the apple through the interim finance committee. And we want to make sure that we're being as responsive as possible to industry, trying to solve the problems that exist as opposed to problems that we might think exist. So with that, that's some of the work that the Treasurer's Office is doing on the commercial rental assistance side. Happy to take any questions or provide any more information if I can.
Thank you, Treasurer Conine. I want to go ahead and invite our panelists to come back live on video now, if you don't mind, so we can see your pretty faces. So we kind of came up with a few questions that we thought might work when we first get on, but I do invite our attendees, if you do have some questions, please go ahead and put those in the chat function, and we will try to get to those as we go along. Do we want to go ahead and start with Bobbi? Do you have a question? Mute. You're still muted. Do we want to go to, there she is.
I am muted. Sorry there. As we were talking about all of the assistance and things that you're looking at, you said it's 3 to 5 weeks from now, just as a clarification, is when you're looking at putting the program out. And then are you thinking you're going to give a week or 2 weeks before? We're really just concerned on timing, where if we extend it out too long, how far out are we really going to be looking at it?
It's a good question, and I think speaks to sort of the nature of this process, right? So we're trying to focus on getting dollars out as quickly as humanly possible, but also focus on not setting up a system that is doomed to failure, like the first round of PPP, like some problems individuals have had with different unemployment systems, right? We want to make sure that when the thing rolls out, it's robust and it works. To that end, we're working with an outside vendor to get that done, and are so as such subject to sort of state purchasing rules, which we can get streamlined, but are still bureaucratic by nature, as well as somebody developing a full system from the outside. The goal is that we can put out criteria a week or so before the thing goes live, with the expectation of a certain live date. Once we're sure that all the testing is working, then applications will be open for a period of time, probably a week, maybe 2 weeks, sort of depending on feedback we get and what the timing looks like. And then we'll be able to start working through the individual tranches of funds based on how impacted businesses were. So the goal would be, you know, kind of from go live 4 weeks, 3 weeks afterwards is when dollars start going out the door, and dollars will go out the door to the businesses that are impacted more first, and then to businesses who are impacted less later.
Perfect.
And then I think we need to talk about how the money is actually going to be paid out. So it's not going to be paid directly to the tenant, correct?
Correct. So all funds go to the landlord for a series of reasons, but one, we wanted to make sure that the funds went to where they were actually due, right, to avoid the diversion problems. The second piece here is there is an exchange. In exchange for getting these funds, the landlord's going to agree, if they choose to, and this is all voluntary, but if the landlord wants to get these funds, they have to agree not to evict the tenant for a period of time afterwards, which we're currently targeting at around 90 days. The intention here is if there's a business that's going to go away, the state, from a policy perspective, doesn't need to throw money at that situation just to try to get a landlord closer to whole, but then lose the job benefits on the other side. We expect demand for this program will exceed supply, so we want to make sure that those funds are going to where we can have the greatest economic impact, and that means businesses that are going to stay open.
And because it kind of relates to this, we have a question from the audience. So it says, if a landlord files for eviction due to non-payment on September 1st and the program doesn't launch until mid-August, will the business be allowed to apply if they face eviction? So I guess maybe they're asking if they're already in the eviction process, will they be able to apply?
Yeah, the business will be able to apply, but our current intention is that eviction will have to be pulled back prior to funds being released. We're not going to send funds out to a landlord who's currently in the process of evicting a tenant.
Great. Natalie, you want to go ahead and ask a question you might have?
I know that you're 3 to 5 weeks away for rolling the program out on the commercial side, but I'm curious if you've considered putting together a collateral piece or something that could be used as a tool for property managers to send out to their tenants.
Absolutely. Great point. I think notification here is going to be exceptionally important. On the residential side, we've created pieces that can be for the landlords. So they know how to convince their residents to apply for this program. Pieces that are in Spanish, that are in English, etc. We'll do the same thing on this front. We just want to make sure we've got all the approvals necessary on what the criteria are and how the program's going to look, which I expect we'll have in the next week or so. Then we can start messaging it and getting a timeline in place. More firm timeline in place. How about that?
Thank you.
Of course.
Great. And then on the landlord side, since they are going to have to approve this, what kind of information are you going to want from the landlord as far as being approved for the funds? Are you going to want you were talking about the property taxes, and leases are, you know, 3 different ways. They're either full service, modified gross, or triple net. So on a full service lease, those taxes are included in the rent and typically in modified gross as well. So what are you going to require from the landlord?
So for those of you who don't know, from a background standpoint, I was in restaurants for quite some time, had about 20 of them. So we've had all different kinds of leases, so mostly on the triple net side. Haven't been able to find a bunch of full gross places on the restaurant side, but if you know any, let me know. I'm free in a couple of years. So the mechanically, right, we're going to have a lease from the tenant and the landlord that is signed so that we can say there's an actual lease in place, right? Our intention is to pay based on the cost of that lease. You know, I think to the extent that taxes were separately demarked, that gets tough. I don't know that we'll go through a process to try and remove the taxes from the gross. In other words, I don't know that we'll do a true up just mechanically from a time perspective. But if someone was to send us a bill for back rent and it said rent, taxes, CAMs, we wouldn't be able to pay the tax percentage because it was out there. This is all, by the by, in preparation for what's called a single audit, which is the Office of the Inspector General comes in and looks at the spending of coronavirus relief funds, and to the extent that the state screws up, the state has to return the money, which I don't think will surprise any of you, leads to higher taxes, right? So we want to deeply try to make sure we don't pay for things that we're not supposed to. And I see a question about reviewing leases will be very time consuming. Does your staff have the expertise? Absolutely not, which is why we're paying to get it done.
If the management, if the property managers on site or actually sending you lease abstracts, would that be helpful in the situation to try and help their tenants out and getting it done faster? Which would just have the solid terms of each one kind of idea?
I think that's a good idea. We want to make sure that anything that we're reviewing or that the outside company is reviewing, we in the big broad sense, right, internal and external resources, is signed, right, and isn't perhaps an abstract created by one side, like a unilateral document. With that said, yeah, I think that'd be a good way to speed it up.
Chris McGarey, do you have any questions for us?
I do. Thank you, Mr. Treasurer. Question we spoke of in our warm-up was our existing tenants that have been in business for a year, let's say into 2019 up to now, seem to be doing okay for now. Most of our tenants, as I checked our records, are less than 10% of our portfolio of commercial tenants are actually behind on rent. It's the ones that are behind we've noticed are those, a lot of those haven't been in business that long. And I know that some of the criteria is that you look at last year's revenue and compare it to this year. Is there any kind of allocation for the, let's say, new businesses that would be just as effective?
In the first round of funding for the program, and again, I think it's important to state here, right, these types of things haven't been done before. So we're learning a lot from other counties, cities, states who are putting them in place. But we're also learning a lot from what we do and the feedback we get and who takes the funds, right? Our goal here is to have a first tranche that deals with only businesses that have been in business for more than 6 months before this period starts. We'll have a process in place for businesses who just sort of fall within that donut hole of open for more than 6 months, but don't have last year's revenue, right? We might look at a month-to-month transaction scale, or just try to figure out where they'd be based on those conversations. We've got the mechanics to do that, right? There's 10 different ways to skin, peel that apple. I suppose people don't say skin that cat anymore. Anyway, so there's a bunch of different ways that we can get at that. I do think intentionally this program is going to be more beneficial to long-term businesses who have fallen on hard times due to the pandemic than startup businesses that, in addition to all the other risks of a startup business, happen to be dealing with the pandemic at the same time, right? Again, in a world of finite resources, we're trying to put them in places where we think we can have the greatest impact.
I just received a question from a tenant actually texting and said they received the PPP funds, but they used those to pay their employees and did not pay their rent. And so while they are looking at eviction now, they're wondering if they could apply to be able to pay their rent.
In the first version of the state program, businesses that took PPP funds will not be eligible to get these funds. Again, we know that there are going to be people left out in the process, but we're trying to focus the support on individuals who have the greatest need. So I think if we have additional supply, further rounds could loosen that up, and we could open it up to individuals with PPP. Specifically, while we're excluding PPP, we're not excluding the small business EIDL loans, or a number of other smaller programs which we know didn't provide direct support in the same way. We're also not excluding programs like from Clark County that would help businesses help refurbish their spaces, right, to make them safer, or buy PPE and things like that, specifically including the PPP, just because of the relatively significant overlap between large businesses and PPP.
So what you're saying is if they apply for the funds that are coming from the city of Las Vegas, for instance, the $2 million they just announced, and the funds from Clark County, they're still eligible for this one as well?
It depends on the program. So Clark County has a rental assistance program. If you apply for the rental assistance program, you will not be eligible for this. If you apply for the PPP support or the put in plexiglass shield support, you would be eligible for this. We'll have when the program goes live of what programs are or aren't eligible.
So would you suggest they probably go ahead and apply for all of them, but see which one they actually get approved for?
Yeah, I mean, at this stage, I think it's difficult to plan out from a business perspective, to plan out your strategy of attack 6 months down the road. That's one of the difficulties for everybody during a pandemic. So to the extent that there are funds out there that seem to be beneficial, I would take them. The PPP, I think the average in Clark County was about $105,000 was the average PPP grant. Obviously that's skewed on the high end, but a majority of businesses who applied for them did get them. That is a better source of funding and an unlimited source of funding relative to the state program.
Thank you. And so another question that came up was, we have some tenants that are, very conscious of their rent, and they made sure their rent got paid, maybe to the detriment of something else. So what about tenants that are current, but that are still struggling and are going to have a hard time paying in the future? Would they be able to apply?
Yep, they can apply. The focus is again on revenue decline year over year, right? So if you made the choice to pay rent versus something else from a commercial perspective, we can help sort that out. Now that's different than on the residential side, right? The residential side is based on outstanding back rent. But on the commercial side, if someone has paid rent but hasn't paid something else, we want to make sure that they don't get immediately kicked out of the program. Again, in its current incarnation, right? The intention is to design a program that meets everyone's needs, but also gets out and gets money out on the street as quickly as humanly possible, so that when additional funds, knock on wood, come in from the federal government, we have a mechanic to distribute those funds quickly and effectively.
I just want to remind our attendees that if you do have questions, please put them in the chat function.
And then we had a question on businesses. Are there any businesses that are going to be excluded in the application process of uses?
Yeah, there's a couple of businesses that are likely to be excluded. There's a back and forth right now about cannabis, but we think there's probably going to be restrictions on the federal level. We're trying to get clarity there. We'll also likely be excluding a number of businesses that didn't close and shouldn't have significant revenue declines as a broad sense. And this is getting into some public policy pieces, but it's likely we will exclude liquor stores. It's likely we'll exclude sex-based businesses. It's likely we'll exclude payday lenders and other short-term lenders. And I'm sure I'm forgetting one or two, but sort of the standard list of government support does not apply groups. Obviously no exclusion on gaming properties, right? That's not who we are.
All right. Any other questions from our panelists?
So just to be clear, on the tenants that have been very good about paying rent, but maybe haven't paid their suppliers and their things, and they get approved by the state, you would be paying the landlord, so they will be prepaying their rents. Is that correct?
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
All right, I'm not seeing any other questions. So Treasurer Conine, do you have any final comments you want to make to our group today?
No, just want to encourage anybody who, as they noodle through it, they've got additional feedback to certainly reach out, and I'm sure Rocky would be happy to consolidate that and get it to us so we can make sure to include it in our conversations. And if anybody has a question or a need on anything, don't hesitate to reach out to our office. The best way is an email, which is ask@nevadatreasurer.gov. That's ask@nevadatreasurer.gov. And I see Shauna's question regarding commercial evictions. Several judges taking the position that there's a complete rent abatement. That seems like a great question for the Attorney General, but I'm not sure where that would be coming from.
Great. Well, thank you very much for joining us today. And again, if you have any other questions, please be sure to contact Treasurer Conine, or you can reach us here and we can work on getting answers for you as well. So I hope you all have a great rest of your day, and we hope to hear from some more of you attendees tomorrow on the call with the county. Thank you.
Thanks so much. Have a great day.